Hello, Heather. Thanks for posting this. Let's go through it. So, noun foraging, past one, GPT, started with GPT S to define LinkedIn for me. I love that. Just be careful about doing that too much on actual client work. You want to be clear about what is AI generated versus what is human generated. So, if you do that and you do some noun foraging, make sure that you say these nouns were suggested by AI, and then the human nouns are suggested by humans. So just put a little bit of like context in there so you don't accidentally start thinking too much like the robots. So great, love that. Screenshots, wow, extensive that you've done here. I love your process. And it looks like also what you've been doing here is thinking through it, like drawing on top of it here. Like, I don't know if you see my cursor, but like here and here. And I love doing that in the margins of books as well, usually digital books. Kind of just writing out what I think are the small system models that I come up with. So I love that. Tons and tons of nouns. You then curated and you found the same problem that a lot of people find on modern websites, that there are a lot of different synonyms for things that are either very closely related or are exactly the same thing. Is account and user and profile the same? Does an organization and a company and a school all follow the same kind of pattern? Network connections, does that also equal following plus followers? This is a great circumstance of noun foraging. Weirdly fun. I find it to be weirdly fun as well. And I can tell you spent way too much time on it because look at all of this. I love it. Although I was still unsure about nested objects and granularity, decided to move forward with individuals, companies, and jobs. Sure, that works for me. Okay, so the way that you did this is you said, here are your instances as examples, and then you were writing down, it looks like types, or it certainly looks like a bunch of attributes here. Job listing, clients, internships. I see. I think this is just the affinity mapping now that I'm looking at it. Here's object instancing. So you said individual, a company with an asterisk. Let me just make sure I understand is the asterisk. Schools seem different than for-profit and non-profit companies, but all three are different from individuals. What's the granularity? That's a great question. And when you start to see where certain objects overlap and where they might diverge in some ways, there's different techniques that we will learn about in this course to deal with all of that complexity. Because you're right, if a school is more like a for-profit than less like a for-profit, you might want those things to inherit the same attributes first, and then they would have their own attributes that are unique to them. Something that we will look into, so don't worry about that. And I love this, that you actually did the instancing and took pictures of it in the UI. Here's something that you may have noticed. While this is a person, you can tell it's a person because it's a circle in this kind of thing, while a company or an organization is a square in this kind of thing. The question is, this is a representation question that we'll get to much later. Like, are these objects distinct enough that people understand? That's more of a matter of opinion and taste. I think so. And you can see here job postings that are like this. So then you went into relationships and you did the model here. So let's take a quick look at this model. It looks like you did the cardinality correctly here. And you rightly bring up, like, I've got questions and I've got notes for things here. And you're asking the right questions, like employees. Does individual need revising? Should we call it employees? Is this true? Can individual users post jobs? So you are doing the thing that the process is hoping you to do, which is ask a lot of questions. And these are questions that either you can answer, you can go to an AI to answer those things, or stakeholder, depending on what you are doing. All right, taking a look at your calls to action here. So you said an individual, follow, message, connect. Yeah, this looks great. Visit website, I will say, this is a CTA of sorts. It's a weak CTA. We'll learn more about the difference between weak CTAs and strong CTAs, but it is certainly a CTA. But just keep that in mind, that it's a weak CTA. And apply, save, show bench details. And you started putting roles in here, which is great. You have to be careful because you've got this idea of an individual, which is an object, and this idea of a company that's an object, and then you've said that there's a role that's an individual user and a role that's a company. Objects and roles can sometimes overlap. Sometimes they cannot. So I tend to make my roles as distinct as possible so they're not confused with the objects, if that makes sense. So a job posting might have a job poster, but you are saying that that would be a company, for example. But I love that you're thinking about roles in here. All right, so now you're questioning a bit about whether or not certain things should be objects or not. So if a company is an institution or alumni might be an attribute, there are ways that we will learn about the upgrading and downgrading of objects into either metadata, what's called either live metadata or dead metadata. That's something that we'll talk about more in the priority round. I know that we will get to it also here in discovery, but just know that there are some times where you have questions like, this feels like an object, but actually it might feel better for right now as metadata that we can upgrade to an object later when it makes sense. And I love that you're asking those questions. I'm grokking. Yeah, great. I'm glad you're grokking all of this. Okay, so let's take a quick look at your mini object map here. And it really does look like, yes, you have done a pretty good job here with the difference between metadata versus core content. Highlights looks like an attribute, but this is actually AI called metadata. Yeah. Interesting. AI would typically create core content. It wouldn't create, it can create core content or metadata. Highlights, if highlights is a kind of narrative written thing, it kind of feels like a description field. Just because an AI wrote the description field doesn't mean that it's metadata. It could also be core content that is AI generated. And looking through here. So one thing that I found helpful is to put the nature of the relationship on the relationship thing. So you'd say a company has 0 to N alumni that work there, that previously worked there, that went to school there, you know, depending on if you're saying company is an institution, like an educational institution. So you're saying using UNC Charlotte, make sure to talk about the nature of the relationship. It will just help everyone out when you're looking at this. So for example, you say an individual has 0 to N posts that they have written, 0 to N posts that they have liked, 0 to N posts that they have saved. You can see that there's some ambiguity that comes in when you don't have the nature of the relationship on these cards. But this is looking great. You are bringing in, so you're doing a very common thing that other folks are doing. You're bringing in new objects that you don't have on this map. So be careful because comment is not an object yet. Images, we would have to talk about exactly what images are. I don't exactly know why this is 0 to N because the individual has a profile pic, but you're saying that they might also have images. So we can talk a little bit more about that. Just let me know in the comments here. And just be careful not to accidentally start bringing in new objects unless they have an object map. They're in your object map as well. They can even be off to the side, being like, I've got this thing that's called posts. And I'm just going to put it over to the side. I'm only going to do one thing, which I'm going to say is posts and post title. And I'm not going to do the rest of it right now, but I know that posts has a relationship to company, for example. One thing I want you to look out for. It's a dangerous thing to do. Don't repeat the attributes that exist in a nested object. You have the object of alumni. I'm going to assume for a second alumni is very similar to individual, okay? If you say that a company has 0 to N alumni, you are also saying that that company, that company has alumni that have all of these attributes that are on individual, assuming that this is also very close to alumni. Doing something like this, where you say where alumni live and what alumni do, really is the same as an individual, their location, which you don't have on here, but you could imagine if location was on here, it would be on the alumni object. And the alumni, would actually be the name of this. So be careful to not repeat the attributes in related objects, or embedded objects or nested objects that exist somewhere else. Hopefully that makes sense. So the alumni alumni you live, what alumni you do, this all belongs to the alumni object. And make sure that it exists only in that one space. This is looking great, Heather, and I think you've done really good work. Let me know if any of this makes, if you've got questions about any of this. I'm sure it makes sense. Be well, and happy OUXing.